Joe, do you find it depressing at all that basically the era that we lived in is now being considered history?
Oh, it definitely hurts every time that music that I enjoy is considered classical or vintage or retro these days. So yeah, it's definitely a struggle with our own mortality. Yeah, with each day, Mark.
I got to agree with you there because when we started discussing the topic of today, it reminded me of a very good time in my life, but then it also reminded me of how long ago that was. And wow, 2008, just man, it's it's like it's like sepia toned at this point, man.
Yeah, it really is. It's just like I don't know, where the time goes. I definitely remember 2008 very well. Hanging out, watching some great Discovery shows during that time. Some of the classics we've talked about before, like MythBusters, was still roaring during 2008. The Cash Cab was a department
Oh,
favorite for me and my roommates,
yes.
and uh, that brings us to the next show. Well, not a Discovery show, I believe. This was the Travel Channel is a part of the Discovery family of channels, and it was probably I think the only thing I think I watched regularly on the Travel Channel. To be honest, outside of there's always like America's like haunted house things. I'd watch those mostly just to laugh at them, but this was the one that I enjoyed.
I got to say, dude, back then, I don't think a lot of us even knew of the Travel Channel because, as you mentioned, Joe, I think during like the daytime, Travel Channel, even Discovery to an extent, and then there were like channels like TLC and a couple others. They all kind of put like
Hmm.
these home renovation shows on, or maybe just like profiles about certain cities and stuff like that. But nothing was really like pulling us, absolutely in. And for a couple of college age men at this point in time, Joe,
Hmm.
you and I probably were both immediately drawn to a man by the name of Adam Richman who was talking about food and how much of it he could possibly eat in a competitive format. Which,
Yeah,
whew,
mhm.
yeah.
It was something, man. Because like I mean, like you said, like all of these the things on the Travel Channel or Home or Garden TV, House Hunters was mostly just hunting for an audience more than anything else. And then you get something like this, which takes a fantastic premise. And when you bring up competitive eating, this isn't like the hot dog eating challenges where you've got a or a pie eating contests where people sit down and we race through a plate of pies or hot dogs. No, this is the much more, I guess, like folksy and very Americana-esque way of competitive eating, where it is pure glory that you're winning in these
Hmm.
contests because this is you go to a restaurant, they have a ridiculous sized piece of food or ridiculously spicy piece of food or an insane quantity of food that you have to finish within a certain time period. And what you win is usually a photo on a wall and a T-shirt. That's it. That's
Hmm.
all you get, and a free meal. You don't pay for what you get, but that's it. That's the most glory. And Adam Richmond made a for a short time. Made a living off of doing this.
Hmm. He sure did. And I know I already mentioned how he came out of nowhere, but Adam Richman really did come out of nowhere because it's not like he was someone who had a large body of work at that point in time. He didn't have like a massive following or anything, so he basically wasn't like a celebrity turned host. He was like just an
No.
up and coming actor straight out of Brooklyn, New York. And I think he may have done what a lot of actors do at that point in time, which is like, hey, I'm going to go star on like a soap opera, maybe a few moving plays, traveling plays.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was really what he did. But honestly, what was really unique about him, though, was that maybe unlike some of the other actors who might be auditioning for things, he just happened to keep a food diary since 1995. And
Ooh.
so he's got relevant data from from the last like 13 years of meals that he's eaten. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And something that he definitely did do that a lot of actors and people in the performance industry likely have done is he also would simultaneously hold jobs in the food service industry because Adam Richmond, while like like we said, didn't really start out as this big name or household name actor or performer. He also didn't just jump right into competitive eating. He, I
Hmm.
think, has held almost like I think usually the beginning of the show, like he will say about how he held almost every job in the food service industry before doing this. So it
Yes.
wasn't like he was necessarily just nope. I was a competitive eater. Let's combine that with the career path I'm looking for. It's like, no, I've worked in restaurants, I've bartended, I've cooked, I've done just about everything around this, and I think this is the next logical step.
It makes him endearing though, like when you first,
Yeah. Hmm.
because a lot of times when you see a cooking show or some kind of travel show like this, sometimes you don't even get that background on who that person is in the intro. It just shows them, and there's a quick, quick icon or something that pops up. No, Adam Richman every time says, it's like, yeah, I've done almost every job in the fast food business or in the, the whatever you want to call it, the food industry. And it's like, yeah, you know what? That's cool. He's not as intimidating to me because, for one, I feel like like Adam and I were in the same character generator. We're both kind of portly gentlemen, so it's like, you know what? I want this guy to win.
Yeah. I guess that's also like such a great part of watching the show is that Adam is genuinely entertaining, whether he is actually like just in the actual like food competition part of the show, which usually is like tends to be while it's the highlight of the episode. This is like well, they're usually like 22-minute shows, and this is like the actual competition maybe amounts for 7 of those 22 minutes. So a good chunk of this show, he's actually introducing you to the area of the restaurant where the food challenge is. He does multiple things in the area. So even though there's this big challenge at the end of the episode, he is still going to other restaurants and trying their ridiculously sized foods. And while doing it, is just entertaining the process, whether he's talking about the area itself or like when he's actually eating the food. He really does a great job of breaking down like flavor profiles and showing you how like this is a well cooked piece of meat, other than just saying, "Hey, look at this," and putting it at the camera. Like, does this look juicy and great? No, like he'll point out what a smoke ring is on a good brisket. He'll
Yes.
talk about how things can just tear off the bone and why things can tear off the bone. So, like you
Mhm.
said, like that keeping a food diary and really knowing his food just goes hand in hand with doing this job very well.
And in which case, it almost every episode is almost a profile of a city rather than even just the food itself, which is what I really liked about it. Because during this time on television, especially for even like for Travel Channel and for Food Network, there's a bit of a shift because of a man named Gordon Ramsay on Fox, who is putting out nightmares in the kitchens that have them, and he's really
Yeah.
transforming the whole, the whole framework of what's going on as to what people would find entertaining when it comes to culinary based TV shows.
Mhm.
Our guy Guy Fieri, or his real name is Guy Fieri, diners, drive-ins, and dives. This is also coming up right around the same time,
Mhm.
so you really are seeing this shift from, hey, we're just going to talk about the hot cuisine and the pricier side of food, and we're going to get into, and I'm not saying that for diners, drive-ins, and dives, by the way, more Gordon Ramsay, but but uh, but it's but
Yeah.
it's a
Mhm.
shift to like infotainment, right? Like we're not just getting food
Yeah.
anymore. Like there's
Mhm.
actual history, there's actual things that are going on in these cities, and so part of that profile weaves in and out of that. So that's really what kind of pulled me in, was I'm not just seeing a guy eat himself to death. It's like I'm actually learning something at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this idea of very similarly, like what Richmond does, kind of what, Guy Fieri, hailing from Flavortown himself does, and giving like sometimes these smaller restaurants advertising at a national level that they otherwise could not do themselves, simply because in at least Adam Richmond's case, they offer some sort of like outlandish eating challenge, things that you may not have heard of before, and he could puts you right in the kitchen. And again, this idea of having these like like Gordon Ramsay or Guy Fieri, who are both like accomplished chefs, although you probably wouldn't normally put those two in the same sentence, but great people. All three of these are like they're accomplished in their own right in the food service or the restauranting industry. So being able to hear from them the expertise, their expertise in cooking, with what they're eating just goes a long, long way.
Hmm. No, well, speaking of going a long way, there were some other shows that came out right around the same time, Joe, that did not go a very long way, and I think it's just a case
Oh,
in point as to how the fork in the road starts to begin here. Because even a guy like Bobby Flay, who was a relatively big name in the early 2000s and still is around today, don't get me wrong,
hmm.
but I mean, he had a show called Grill It with an exclamation point, so it's like Grill It with Bobby
With
Flay.
Bobby Flay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that show didn't work out. Came out the same year. We're going to go rapid fire with a couple of these because I honestly only remember two more of them. But there was the Food Detectives, How'd That Get on My Plate, The Cooking Loft, and Ask Ada, which was a show that had like the main host Ada and then like this science based guy. And then the show mysteriously disappears, and so does its host, and no one knows what happened. So
Oh,
it's a it's a rather interesting time for that stuff. I mean, because we've talked about other TV shows in the past and what kind of premieres around that same window, and unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of like competitive eating shows obviously out there, but there's not a whole lot of things that competed directly with Man versus Food and won. It just didn't happen.
no, and it sounds like in the case of Ask Ada, you should probably hire the food detectives to figure out what the hell happened, but you can't because they are in fact gone themselves.
Yeah, everything kind of went mysterious there. But you know what though? As we've talked about the infotainment side of this era, though, Joe, what else was happening to the Travel Channel during this time? Can you remember, like, what else was happening?
Um, Travel Channel 2008. God, no, it's pretty difficult because again, this was one of the few things I want to say because like even like the Ghost Adventures and that stuff, I think that's more of a more recent takeoff than that. So I'm not even sure the Travel Channel did outside of the show in 2008 because I mean maybe it was like NASA, the NASA channel, which is just Earthscapes for most of the time, except it's just like this, you know, screensaver of exotic locations.
Honestly, Joe, it almost represented a presidential term of prosperity because
Oh,
during the initial run of this show, which was about
hmm.
4 years, 2008 to 2012, we have Man versus Food, we have Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern, and then we have
Ah,
No
yes.
Reservations featuring the late Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, hmm.
And so Travel Channel, oddly enough, during this time, and for the folks that listen and or watch us, try to remember what you were doing if you liked this show. Because for me, Joe, we were sitting there in college, me and a group of like, 6 or 7 dudes, maybe one girl at a time. We would be watching this block of TV. Like we'd be watching Man versus Food. I think Bizarre Foods was like before, I want to say. But either way, this was a very unique time for Travel Channel because before that point, I would never have an excuse to watch that channel at all.
Hmm.
And this absolutely gave me a reason. It put it on the map for me. So I don't know if I did that for you. Maybe you didn't stick around, Joe.
I mean, again, I really, I would say probably didn't stick around, especially like you said after 2012, because that's when Adam Richman ends up like stepping down from the show. We eventually get a new host, but I stuck around for that. This is the show that got me. I just love that this idea of him like powering through and struggling through these massive meals. I remember like my brother and I like trying our own like little man versus food challenges with each other and just seeing how much of something we could eat around the holidays when we would get together, and it was just something fun. So while I didn't like stick around for Anthony Bourdain, while I know there's a it's my unpopular I think I'm in the unpopular opinion side of that where I'm not a big Anthony Bourdain guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he just didn't quite do for me. I was like, yeah, he kind of seems like a prick. He's not really my cup of tea. But Andrew Zimmerman was always fun. And then after this fell off, and you kind of had that limbo of the show that I liked, I kind of went away on Travel Channel, and then until they now they focus on ghosts, I think everything is ghosts on the Travel Channel.
Hmm.
And it's kind of that thing where like it's the Travel Channel is kind of moving to the History Channel, where it was ghosts were after midnight to show you these spooky locations around the world because it kind of fit with what the network was doing, but not really. Like Ancient Aliens kind of fit with the network was doing, but not really. And then it just caught on fire and like, well, that's the network now. That's all we're doing. So they lost
It's a
me.
it is a different identity for sure because as you mentioned, you have Anthony Bourdain who is
Hmm.
journalist slash chef, if you want to call it that way, and then Andrew Zimmern who's a chef but then turned journalist in a way, and then you've got Adam Richman who is like this is who I want to be after college. I want to just go travel and eat and enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And so each
Hmm.
show does have a different unique personality to it. But
Hmm.
what I found funny was that while Bourdain and Zimmern found a way to join forces and do some crossover stuff, they probably weren't going to do that with Adam. And as you mentioned, it's because he's not picking, 5-star restaurants to go
Hmm.
check out. A lot of times he's just going to places that have the longest lines and
Yeah.
frankly cool stories. And to your point, Joe, I did kind of the same thing with my brother because if there was anything near us in the Midwest that Adam had gone to,
Hmm.
we were going to go check it out.
Nice.
So um, I didn't do the challenges that he did, but we did visit a sandwich shop
Hmm.
in like North Chicago that, back then I could put down 2 sandwiches at a time. Can't do that anymore. But yeah,
Yeah.
probably a good thing.
No. No, I think the only thing close to this I think I've ever done was well before Man versus Food started, where me and my friends were in Las Vegas and we went to a place I'm pretty sure it was called like the Thunderbird Cafe or the T-Bird Cafe, and it had a calzone that was like the size of a small table, like just like even like think like an end table, coffee table. That was the calzone, and there was no prize for eating the calzone. It was just simply a friend or an acquaintance was like, "I bet you cannot eat that thing in one sitting." I'm like, "I'm gonna do it."
Yeah.
Didn't do it. Didn't do
Yeah.
it. That was 3 meals, is what that calzone ended up being.
Which is what I like. Okay. So as we talk about Man versus Food, what I
Hmm.
thought was one of the best things about it is that yes, Adam is not a competitive eater. He had no idea about competitive eating being a part of this because he went through 6 different tryouts to get this role or get become the host.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, they mentioned absolutely nothing about that. They just go, "Can you talk about food?" And he's like, "Yes, I can. Let me bust out this
Hmm.
book I got for you." And so what I think ends up working for this show, though, outside of the competitive eating side of it, is that unlike some of the competitive eating you see on YouTube nowadays, you do see some of these guys go after the same stuff, fairly often.
Hmm.
There's a ton of pizza challenges. There's a ton of burrito challenges. I mean, you name it, dude. I follow a couple of them and I watch content, but it's like, how many times can you watch somebody eat a massive burger before it's like, yeah, I think I understand what
Hmm.
you're doing and I think you can do this.
Hmm.
Let's move on. Adam wasn't like that, dude. There was a ton of variety to this show.
Hmm.
Like, how many different challenges can you think of, Joe? Like in terms of just what he tried to do.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, I think you can break his challenges down into like basically 3 categories. Either it's a massive size of something, it is an incredibly spicy, or it is a quantity of something. Because like there's even one. I think I think one of some of the more fun ones to watch are when food wins, because
Yeah.
you can see just how difficult it is to track and actually do these. And when you look at it, Adam did have a winning record. I think he was 37-22. So he won about like 65-ish% of what he went into, which is great because again, like you said, it feels like some of these like the YouTubers out there, like they're going for things they know they can get because that's probably what keeps people watching. But it was that fun idea that Adam doesn't win everything. So like you hit things where like it's something it's like he's gonna try and down 5 milkshakes in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, he doesn't do it. That's a lot of milk,
Wait,
a lot of dairy to take down in a short period of time. And it's
yeah.
insane. Yeah.
And it's crazy though, because he does a separate challenge later on where he has a massive container that has about 9 milkshakes in it
Hmm.
and then has to finish like a pound and a half worth of like a deli sandwich. And so during that one you mentioned, yeah, like he can't put down 5. But then later on, he somehow manages to do twice that plus a sandwich. So it's like there really isn't any expectation you can have going into a food challenge for him.
No, it's all over the board. And actually, the shirt I'm wearing today is because of Adam Richman, where he went and did the Don Shula Steak Challenge in Miami in the second
Yes.
season of the show, and he was wearing this shirt. It was just a different color, but I was like, yeah, I love that shirt. I will always call it Joe Robbie, referring to the stadium the Dolphins play in, and its name changes every other year. So
Oh,
it's this, but this is what it started out as. So yeah, and in that case, again, that's where it goes back to like, yeah, he's eating this huge steak that's basically the whole cow at that point.
yeah.
But the ones that are the ones I think that are really hard to watch is when he does spicy challenges, because you just see the absolute pain in this man as he is trying to do them. Where I think, and God, like, he doesn't lose every spicy challenge, but I think these are the ones he loses the most. I know, like one that always stands out wasn't even like the main challenge of the show, but he couldn't even do it, which is crazy to think that he was beaten by the small part of the show, and it was like God, it was like a pasta with like a ghost pepper like ragu sauce,
Ugh.
and like couldn't do it. And you see him like before that, because what's also great is the fun part of the show is that often when he's talking about the challenge or the menu item is he'll be in the restaurant before that interacting with people, seeing what they're eating, even if it's not the same item. In this
Yeah.
case it was the same item, and they happen to publicly shame if you do not finish the pasta with the ghost pepper ragu by serving up a popsicle on a plate while singing you failed throughout the restaurant. So he like jovially joins in on that and then is not able to do it himself. So and that's where I think challenges like that are really the big reason why Adam just couldn't keep up with the show. I know you're looking at like he steps down in 2012, and they were like lots of things that were like, oh, is it health concerns? Did he go vegan? It was one of the rumors going around as to why Adam quit the show. But part of it, and what he said himself, is that like, hey, it's a lot to put down. It's a lot to do, and it's really hard on your body. And I just don't think I can do that as a career anymore. And again, like the spicy ones are the ones that get me. I'm like, there's no, like, one, I can't handle spice. I love the taste. I hiccup immediately. So, as someone who dies instantly from having something too spicy, I totally get why, like, even that third of the challenges he would go after would be enough to, like, I can't keep doing this, guys.
Well, it's pretty clear to see what happens to him over time. I mean, he goes from being like, and I'm not knocking on Adam's weight at all, because trust me, like I said, I was like the same size that Adam was when this show began. But you
Mm-hmm.
can see that it does begin to take a physical toll on him. He
Yeah.
does gain some weight throughout the series, and this is despite him working out like twice a day
Mm-hmm.
and doing training for this show. And I mean, Joe, the thing that you called out a few moments ago that I think is worth pointing out is that Adam does, you do see the pain on his face as he's doing these challenges.
Yeah.
Like when it's a volume based thing, I mean, they're catching every minute, the sweat on
Mm-hmm.
his forehead, the just the look on his face of
Oh
despair,
God, yeah.
and and unfortunately, in the case of the ghost pepper extract chicken wings that he ate, that restaurant sabotaged what would have been the normal challenge, and they put the entire bottle of ghost chili
Oh my
extract on these
God.
wings. So if you talk about reasons why he's quitting, it's because of that challenge.
Yeah.
It's because he has to keep doing these things, and I can't fault him for wanting to do that. But at the same time, he does stick it out
Mm-hmm.
into that fourth season, which was renamed, Man v Food Nation, where he ends up being, it's the same format as far as like visiting a place and
Mm-hmm.
showcasing things, but then he's coaching other people, how to do this. What's your approach? How are you
Yeah.
going to eat this
Mm-hmm.
food? So, I mean, it's obviously not the same, right? We're
Mm-mm.
there to see Adam compete, but at the same time,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
still a pretty fun ride across those first 4 years.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, Man vs. Food Nation just again wasn't the same because we're there to see Adam. Part of the endearingness of the show is again seeing one man struggle against all of this food. So now when it's kind of divided up among several people and Adam is still there, but it just doesn't quite hit the same. So after that, the show goes in a larger hiatus, and eventually will come back in 2017 with a new host, and it goes kind of back more towards how it started with Adam taking on, and now we have Casey Webb doing it, and this is one where it's. I don't know. It's not even like controversial with this, but like I think Adam Richman not a fan of Casey Webb taking over the show, from what I have read and seen. I know, and it's sparsely out there. I think one of the only real pieces that I saw was that someone had tweeted, "Hey, just watched New Man versus Food. Not the same without you, Adam.
Hmm.
They shouldn't have rehosted the show, and either rehost the show or not a fan of the new host." And Adam's response was, "New host? LOL question mark, more like some guy who stole a car, or like
Mm.
a guy driving a stolen. It's more like a guy driving a stolen car. So I don't know if that was him just having fun with it, or if he's just not a fan of the new host taking the show. That
Yeah.
almost like this was his baby and it's not his anymore.
Well, there's something to know about Adam Richman in that he did get in trouble on social media a few times, during the show and after the show.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the Casey Webb remarks, which Casey Webb is really not someone that I want to keep watching. It's nothing against Casey Webb. It's the fact
Mm-hmm.
that I fell in love with that first 4 years, and it was a formative time for me, and
Mm-hmm.
so that's what I know. That's what I liked, and somebody else is going to like that second iteration.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and enjoy it. Casey Webb's energy isn't quite the same as Adams for me. Like
Yeah.
once again, it's the fact that I think Casey, they were shopping for like a safe host
Mm-hmm.
for this show. And when it came to Adam, it was like the lightning in a bottle scenario we've talked about many times before, where he just happened to portray a very relatable person, someone who isn't necessarily, pompous, but still
Mm-hmm.
somehow knows food. And so that's really what did it for me. But I will say this: I'm not dogging Adam Richman for his social media issues that he had, because he got into some pretty hot water for, I would say, roughly like 2 or 3 months. And he made some disparaging remarks, at least some thought, towards women, and said some things. And after that happened, things died down for a little bit. And oddly enough, it was right around the time that first run of the show kind of went away.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it sucks because a lot of us didn't know why the show was going away. And so that was an easy thing to assume at that point in time. And that's why I thought the show stopped being made. was because of that, because of the comments he made. I didn't know it was
Mm-hmm.
just because of production and background stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like you said, like it's inexcusable to do even like what he did. Like you probably should keep your mouth shut on those things. If you it's almost like the old axiom, like you have nothing to say, don't say it at all. But the internet gives us kind of a free space to do this, and sometimes we run our mouths and you get the result of it. It would not be the first time someone said something incredibly stupid, either online or on their own program, that resulted in them losing a show.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
Which,
hey,
and this is, and that's before a lot of this stuff was happening. I would say it was like right towards the beginning of it. But I don't really live in that space, because in the years preceding, Adam Richman
mm-hmm,
clearly corrected maybe the intent. And as you know, Joe, the intent about things can go so many different directions, right? I mean,
oh yeah,
a lot of times your intent doesn't matter. It's what you said and how it can be interpreted. So regardless of where you might
mm-hmm.
fall on that line, I think what's important to realize about Man versus Food is that it was lightning in a bottle for a reason. And Joe, do you know why that could be, or at least the reason for why I might be saying this?
um, like, for a reason. I mean, it kind of had everything, man. Like it did what the network was made to do by showing you and highlighting you different places around the country. It had incredibly good looking food, and like the host was just, I don't know. Again, for I guess like relatable in that like he's not like this like 5-star restaurateur. He's going to places that, like, hey, I could afford to eat at this place. And it just kind of had, and then of course on top of that, like, he was entertaining in the process. So it was like, again, like, this is perfect storm of entertainment and what that network was supposed to be. That's what I would guess. But Mark, is that the same reason for you?
No, what I'm going to throw out there is something that my brother and I would celebrate every single year because for some reason it wasn't big on ESPN and then suddenly it was. And we can't really pinpoint exactly when, but we have some theories. And one of them, Joe, would be Nathan's hot dog eating contest, which has been around for well over, 50 years? I think it was like 1979 or something when it first happened. But in the early 2000s, there was a man by the name of Takeru Kobayashi, who, if you remember, Joe, he was representing Japan in the eating contest every year and taking home hardware. And then suddenly, the US of A generated a legend known as Joey Chestnut.
Not to be outdone in eating, America responds.
Yes. We may not be able to do things that will benefit the general public, but to bring up a competitive eater who can win it all. That began in 2006, roughly 2007, when these guys went head to head. And Takeru kind of won it out in the beginning, but then Chestnut starts winning in like 2007. I think 07 was the first time he won. And when you think about it, Joe, that's when ESPN is like putting the competition on TV. Like you can actually see the eating competition. And all of a sudden, competitive eating is considered a sport, just like esports would be a thing, like 10 years from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
yeah. It wasn't hiding down the Ocho anymore, just right out on ESPN.
No, seriously though. But when you think about it, dude, it feels so deliberate. It's almost like one of the producers at Travel Channel saw that and just went, there has to be a way that can work. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly 1 year later, boom, here we have Man versus Food. I mean, I don't think that's a mistake or just happening organically, Joe, by any means.
No, I do not think it is that much of a stretch of the imagination. But on that bombshell, we would like to thank you for listening to the Digital Dissection podcast, as we appreciate all the Dissection crew does for us week after week. Your support goes a long way, and if you like this episode, check us out on YouTube, where we make weekly videos about our favorite things.
We also love hearing from you, so feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com or in our communities across social media. We do love your ideas, suggestions, and, well, pretty much anything, so long as it doesn't make Joe and I have to eat a large quantity of food. And until next time, pop culture nerds, keep on dissecting.